Hey, it's Amethyst Virgo. I'm back to talk about the sign of Aquarius. So on my community tab, last I checked, Aquarius had won. So we're going to go with Aquarius this time around. I have the signs to the series, signs to the houses series. Check it out. I've done several of the signs. And so even if you don't have a particular sign in a planet, you still have that sign on the cusp somewhere in your chart. And so it can give you some insight to the energy, especially people who are concerned about empty houses. Well, we still want to look at what signs on the cusp, and we still can interpret that using the planets that rule that sign and to see where those planets are in your individual chart. So the thing we have to know about Aquarius, and I'm going to do this really quickly, is the duality, the Saturn influence, the original ruler, the traditional ruler, Saturn. That is where we get more of that rigidness in thought that we can sometimes see. So Aquarius duality is sometimes the inventive, the innovative approach. That's the Uranus influence, the modern ruler, right? Of being unpredictable, spontaneous, not following structure. But Saturn is about structure. So how do we have a sign that is ruled by two completely different planets? Because you can say, well, Scorpio is said to be ruled by Mars and Pluto. Mars and Pluto, to me, have a little bit more of a similarity to each other than I would say Uranus and Saturn. Okay, now Mars and Pluto, we do differentiate. I have videos about all of that, but Uranus and Saturn are very different. But there's still a goal attached. I would say with Uranus, it's about, again, that's more of a, that energy is more about the freedom, everyone having the same rights, the same ability to be not restricted, not bogged down by what society wants us to do. And Saturn being about tradition and doing things in a certain way. And with Aquarius, what you'll sometimes see is you can see both of that. You can see the Aquarian that sometimes does want to follow things in a certain procedure in a certain way, because Aquarius is going to do that when they see, wait a minute, we have to do something for everybody. It's the detachment of just ego and self, the Leo, right? And by ego, I don't mean like egotistical, but Leo is that pride point, it's self, right? But Aquarius is not supposed to be about self. So that's where we get that more rigidity, where it's like, we sometimes, I said this in one video, Aquarius energy is kind of like, we have to sacrifice one for all. That's that kind of energy with Aquarius. It's like, we need to do what makes sense for everybody. So that's where sometimes you might get that detached stereotype or idea, because Aquarius sometimes is not thinking about you and your individual need and yours. It's like, what makes the most movement, forward moving, right? The approach, something that is going to move us forward. And we can't move forward if we're worrying about your feelings. We can't move forward if we don't have new thought. You're stuck in the past. You're stuck in the past, right? And so that you're not going to get as a default trait warmth. Now, we're not talking about you as the Aquarius or your Aquarius mom or dad who you're like, they love me, right? We're talking about the energy of it. It's not by default warmth. It is about logic. It is about forward moving. And sometimes when you move forward, you can't be worried about the emotions, the feelings. He did this, she did that. Okay, you can go to another sign for that. And with Uranus, again, that influence of that spontaneity. And Saturn, it's about direction. I say this about Aquarius all the time. Yes, you can have the Aquarius people that do kind of fit that very eccentric type of stereotype or view. This person's different. Sometimes you can see it physically. We'll talk about the first house in a moment. But at the same time, what's really going on here with Aquarius is also this need for stillness. It's a fixed sign. So what I mean by stillness, so it's fixed. And similar to how I've said this before, and I think there's somebody else that said this before, so I don't know if this is perfectly just mine, but like Scorpio as water is like ice. But then I said, I think Pisces is like a pond. It's like a stream. And Cancer is like rain, because that's cardinal water. Whereas Aquarius is like, as one of the air signs, I guess you could say Aquarius is like when you walk outside in the cold, for those of us who live in those climates. When you walk outside and it's winter, and that air just hits you, but it stays that way. It's kind of like Aquarius. It's fixed, and you can't kind of ignore it. It's going to be different. The energy is going to be different. The approach is going to be different. The ideas are going to be forward thinking or progressive, perhaps in some way, or just within their own thought, their own local like understanding of what something is. And also, we understand that one thing I'll say before I move on to the houses, sextiles Aries. And, I have the video on the continuum of the signs, continuums, but when we talk about the sextiles, maybe I'll do a video on them. Aquarius and Aries both are about freedom, right? Lack of conforming. Aries is just doing what it instinctually needs to do. It's the body, it's the physical, it's the spirit of adventure. Aquarius is the logical approach to freedom. Free the mind. Free our mind from how we used to do things so we could do it this way. So wherever Aquarius is in your chart can represent originality, innovation, where you rebel, where something's different. Something in your life might be a little bit different than other people. So let's jump into the first house. So the first house, a lot of times, so we'll see if we're just doing plain old whole signs, obviously if you're Aquarius rising, you're going to have Aquarius in that first house, but you could have a person who has Aquarius in the cusp of the first house. But then they have Pisces actually in the first house. So who like to play around with their look, even when they're in conformity. So here's what I mean. I know someone who's pretty professional when they need to be. They're pretty professional. They know how to dress appropriately for work. But when they have their off time, they're very experimental with their appearance and their clothing and their makeup, right? So that can be one example of Aquarius rising. The first house is of self, but it also can represent the physical self, the body. Mars rules the first house, so it's what we see the person's actions, what they're doing. And sometimes you can see the physical, the clothing as well there. And the style the person may also have. When you think of these people, they stand out. There's something different about them. For some people, it could be more of that quirky energy. I had met Aquarius on the first house cusp rising people. There's a quirkiness. But it's an acceptance of themselves. It's, yeah, I know I'm different, so what? There's not a self-conscious energy here. And also sometimes you can see some people that have more of their self-assertion. They're known for that person. Go to them if you want to get a different idea. Go to that person. They're the person people go to when it's like, I already know that this person has a really good understanding of who they are and what they think. Now, again, the thing is you could also be known for being too fixed. They could be part of your identity where like people could be afraid to talk to you about certain things. Now, again, you're going to be really accepting. So that's the thing about Aquarius energy. It's pretty accepting. It's not a judgmental sign, but it's hard to change their mind about anything that pertains to them. So if you have an Aquarius first house person, you have to understand their identity is, for the most part, locked in. They know what they want to be. They are content with being that way. And so trying to really change them, mold them, have them turn into something else is an affront to their actual being. The first house, the people with the first house placements, it's a conscious energy of, I'm this is what I am. Now, again, you can have people that have setbacks, Saturn delayed, right? Uranus being in the first house versus the Aquarius rising can be quite different. Uranus more of the experience of your identity. The rising by itself, or the first house cusp, Aquarius just being there is just, the approach in which you view life. You view life in a different way. You've taken different routes perhaps, because we do have to understand the fact the rising gives us that lens of like the path almost of how we're going to approach certain situations. And because of the way we decide to deal with life through our rising sign, that is how we are treated, right? That is how we experience things. Is why so many people, when they get readings, are like, wow, I never knew as much about my rising, but yes, like I've always dealt with X, Y, and Z. I've always had to respond this way. Well, that's because people have expected certain things of you. So I don't want to go too much into that. But that's what we're getting with Aquarius rising. The first house Aquarius person, there is a need for you to also assert what is different about you. Let that lead you. If I see someone with Venus and Aquarius, I'm like, ooh, Venus, right? Venus is attraction. I'm not just talking about romance, but attractive. People attracted to how you do things. People attracted and notice you. So when you have certain placements in your chart, you have to finagle them. Use them to your advantage. So if you have Aquarius energy in the first house, you're more easily going to express your differences, what makes you unique. You can more easily get people drawn in, especially if someone has maybe Mercury in Aquarius in the first house. Well, now your unorthodox, your new ideas are part of your identity. People now view that as a part of who you are, which is why it's very important, people with first house placements, to really establish who you are, because it's going to be a part of your life theme no matter what. Now, the second house, so to, change positions in terms of your jobs, in terms of your money. Frequently, you can see some people, depending on the degree, and especially if they have any placements in there, they change their jobs very frequently. You're like, wait, weren't you just a barista? Weren't you just working here? Weren't you just working with your uncle at the mechanic shop? Like, what's going on? Right? But the problem is, not problem, but a lot of times certain signs are always seeking purpose. Aquarius is always seeking where they belong. who's going to listen to my ideas? And the second house is about stability. So before that person, especially if the planets are there, you have to kind of understand what you're trying to do. Who are you trying to get to listen to you? Who are you trying to get to understand you? Then it's going to help you with your job. It's going to help you with your vocation, right? Because if you're someone who's like really good at something and nobody cares about it but certain people, you might need to work in that profession. It could be a unique job. It could be something that's not very common. It could be the type of job you're like, oh, I don't know too many people that do that work. What else did I say? Your work has to be connected to a common goal with other people. Typically, that's what you're going to need to do. And until you find that group, you find where you belong. You find the people who accept you. You find the people who are willing to let you be what you are without trying to restrict you too much, because you don't like that restriction. They're going to be dissatisfied. And this is the people that you can see sometimes like changing jobs, like I said before, very much so. And it's not always because they want to do it. It's they're trying to find their group. They're trying to find their calling. You're trying to find, similar to Sagittarius. Sagittarius is more of a journey. So Sagittarius people sometimes have to go through a Sagittarius energy, Sagittarius second house, Sagittarius moon, Sagittarius, especially in Sagittarius midheaven. They need experience. Them experience. You are trying to find, if you have Aquarius in the second house, some of you, now again, some of you might be like, no, yeah, I work in a strange job, or I work in a strange field, or I'm the only one that knows how to do this. Sometimes you can see a person who works in the field, but they're the only one. You know that person at the job where it's like, hey, if you want that done, you got to go to that person because they're the only one that knows how to do it. So there's some of you that might have learned to become that person, especially maybe Sun and Aquarius in the second house. But at the same time, some people are just, finding their way, finding where they believe is home. Now, again, the degree, the houses, the planets in the house are going to really show us which Aquarius on the second house cusp person are you. Now, sometimes you can see strange occupations for this. You can see people that have strange unorthodox jobs, or, strange attitudes about money. Maybe money is not the moving factor for some of you, and again, we all could use some more money, right? But it's just that. Okay. Aquarius in the third house. Well, you kind of rebelled against, traditional learning. You might have been the one, like, is Aquarius and learning. Aquarius can be very, 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 very smart, very intelligent. And what I've noticed, this is experience. And so what I've noticed about Aquarius is, I'm talking about the sun in particular, sometimes Mercury, but the sun. So they're comfortable showing intelligence, but it has to be under their own conditions. So that's kind of like what we're dealing with Aquarius in the third house. It's like, yeah, I know I'm intelligent. You kind of, that's the fixed attitude of Aquarius a little bit. Like Aquarius is not, now again, sometimes Aquarius draws too much from around them, right? So remember, we're devoid of the sun. If the sun is in Aquarius, it's actually in detriment because it rules Leo. The sun rules Leo. So, the third house Aquarius energy is sometimes like a person who kind of shies away from traditional type of learning. You don't want to just do your test. You don't want to accept what someone else said. You want to find it out for yourself. And sometimes you can find people who just have unusual hobbies and usual interests in certain topics. You could find a person who is a forward thinker. They could be the person that figures things out. They figure out the Rubik's Cube, right? You hand them a Rubik's Cube. Okay, that person has Mercury in Aquarius. That person has Aquarius energy in that third house. They just figured it out. Because there is a level of, the ability, Uranus in general. This is why I prefer to talk about both planets, Saturn and Uranus, because there are certain things that Aquarius does that I think has to be defined by Uranus to some extent. The unpredictability in something, the ability to say like, wait, because Aquarius sometimes can be underestimated as well. Aquarius is going to do something when they feel it is a part of the greater plan, when they feel it's something that actually can move forward. So sometimes Aquarius people won't go along with you. And this is particular to the third house as well. They won't go along with you because they don't see it's going to work. It's not going to work. It's like a Sag energy as well. Forward thinking. Now, Sag is more of the prophecy, right? Sag is more of the truth. So you have a Sag energy person who's really spiritual, like really tuned in, not just the ones just talking, the ones who's tuned in. And Aquarius, remember, we have to remember Aquarius and Uranus is also linked to psychic abilities, okay? And so when we think of that, sometimes you can have the person who's like not going along with the plan because they already know what's going to happen. They already see it, especially with trends in society and groups of people. Aquarius can be really perceptive in that way. And again, in a way that other signs zoom in on the person. Scorpio zooms in on the person, probably. Right? Let me zoom in on your psychology. But Aquarius is able to look at the group and just pick out, okay, you know, and just understand the dynamics of things really well. And so a lot of times Aquarius third house people, you know, have really strange ideas. Sometimes you can have a person that sometimes has like ideas that are hard for other people to relate to. I say this all the time with Aquarius energy. Great, you know, I have one planet in Aquarius, Jupiter, but you can't rely so much on Aquarius energy that you forget to relate. You sometimes have to bring that forward thinking down, bring that fixed energy down, bring down that logical, this is what I think, this is what I know, bring it down. Because you have to go back a couple of times, get back to that Libra zone where you're now relating to people, where a person actually wants to listen to you, where you can get your plan done sometimes by bringing, and that's all signs, it's not just Aquarius, bring it back. Because sometimes you can have too much of one sign. You're doing too much. You need to go back and hit up some of these other signs in your chart and learn to communicate in a way that'll help you out. Now, I'm pretty sure there's something I'm missing that I wanted to say about Aquarius in the third house. But you know, you could have people, again, some of them are just, they're self-learners. I want to learn on my own. I'm rebelling against this system because I already know this. The self-taught child, the self-taught student. A lot of times you can see a person who's really rebellious with their ideas, but they were a good student. That's a different sign there, right? The studious person is you know, is going to be represented in a different sign. Aquarius is always in the third house, going to rebel a little bit against the information. As far as siblings go, sometimes some people, Aquarius can represent multiple. Aquarius represents the group. Third house represents siblings. You can sometimes see like a theme, sibling theme with Aquarius in the cusp of the third house, especially if there's planets in there representing the relationship and the dynamic. If the moon is there, you already know my theory on Aquarius moons. I know a lot of Aquarius moons. It's very interesting. Yeah, I have some in my family as well. So with Aquarius moon, sometimes like there's been situations where the Aquarius moon person feels different. And I don't mean just saying that because it's Aquarius, but they've had experiences where they feel different than siblings, different than somebody else for some reason. Now, the fourth house Aquarius person, you know, this could have been a person who was raised in an untraditional type of household. This could be the person who's very into extended family. This could be the person who wasn't maybe raised around their family. This could be a person who, yeah, they live with their extended family. Their aunt and uncle, they call them mom and dad, right? This could be a person who moved around a lot, but had a lot of exposure to a lot of different people. Probably not raised as religious. And if they were, it could be fanatical. Aquarius energy, you've got to be careful, can be a bit fanatical. Remember, it's fixed and it can have unorthodox ideas. And so I'm not saying that religion in general, Sagittarius could be that too. But remember, Aquarius can sometimes, again, Saturn, tradition, Uranus, different. And for some people it could be good. Like you could have been raised on a farm and maybe you're just, you know, you were raised in a very interesting family dynamic. You were raised in a place that was very much, you know, different than your peers or something like that, or raised, again, extended family. Because remember, Aquarius is the group. So this could be a person who's raised in a communal society in some way. Now, fifth house. Well, if you Aquarius in the fifth house, that's, you know, you're probably someone who's really creative when it comes to ideas. This could be the person who creates things, inventions. This is this child who constructs things out of straws. This is the child who, you know, they get their confidence from doing things that require them to use their mind. You probably want to challenge them. Aquarius does like a good mental challenge. They really do. So this could be someone, you know, you benefit from those types of activities. What I would say, like make examples, like, you know, someone playing chess, that's Aquarius. Someone enjoying it is Aquarius in the fifth house, because there is a strategy there. When Aquarius in the fifth is in the house, in terms of image, even, this is a person who stands out for how they come across in terms of their confidence. This could be a person, if they're a performer, they're different. They're different. Their sound is different. Their approach is different. Fifth house, as far as dating goes, sometimes, you know, you would look at the degree of the house and all that stuff. You would also likely want to look at any planets. You can have flirtatious energy with Aquarius because we're not dealing with stability, like meaning this, it's fixed. So Aquarius always knows what it's trying to get. I keep saying this. I don't care if Uranus is one of the rulers. Aquarius is always, there usually is a goal. Even when we don't understand what's going on inside that mind, there's a goal there. And Aquarius of the fifth house is, when we're talking about flirting and dating, there's gonna be, an experience, trying to figure out certain things, wanting to perhaps, date around. Again, we talk about Aquarius as the group. You're not focused on the singular person. Aquarius energy is typically not attached all the way to one person. And I don't mean that as you. If you're an Aquarius person, don't stress out. Don't be like, but I love my wife. I'm not talking about that. Okay. I'm talking about the energy of it. So yes, depending on what's in that house, that fifth house, Aquarius person has a lot of romantic partners, dates around a lot, or just very, intrigued, interested in other people. Now, again, do they get attached? Maybe, probably not. Aquarius might not even chase you all the way. There's a friendship dynamic sometimes that needs to come into play with Aquarius in relationships. There's usually a friendship. We need to get to know each other first. And then, you could have a person as a pattern. You know somebody like that? I know somebody like that. Their friends all become kind of, it blends in. Your friends and your lovers blends in. Remember, the fifth house is not serious though. It is fun. It is leisure. It's things that we like. But, it's not going to be to that magnitude of the seventh house, and especially not the eighth house of intimacy. Aquarius, fifth house, like your freedom. You like your freedom. You like to do the things you like to do. You probably do have some friendships that you kind of can be a little spontaneous. Okay, let's go do this. Cool, let's go. But you probably also have a really good understanding of what you like as well. Not just someone going along for the ride. Aquarius and the cusp, when we talk about children, it could go either way. You could have multiples because, again, Aquarius can be in the group. And I've seen people's charts where, like, Aquarius represents there's multiple kids in the family or something like that. But also can go through freedom, right? So you're still going to be a person that in some way needs your own individuality, your own identity away from your children, away from family and things like that. Aquarius in the sixth house cusp. Where you at? It's me. I have Jupiter in Aquarius. So Aquarius on the cusp of the sixth house. Typically, you're going to be a problem solver. You can think quickly on your feet, even when you like to plan things out. So for instance, Virgos, we like to plan things out. I also have my North Node in Taurus. Process, right? It's about process and planning things and having routines so that you know what to expect, so you know how to handle things. However, Aquarius here can kind of shake things up, but it makes you quick on your feet. If something does need to get done, you use the Aquarian energy to try to overcome difficulties. Aquarius energy is really good at problem solving. Okay. Now, with Aquarius being on the cusp of sixth house also can mean work relationships. Can be a theme. Friendships developing from your everyday life can be themes. So wherever you go, if you're there for long enough, you're likely going to make some friends. Even if you introverts, you're going to make some friends. Okay. Anywhere that you go on the regular, you're going to start to meet acquaintances and people that you connect with, especially we're talking about work. What else did I want to say about Aquarius on the cusp? Like, again, I don't want to talk about Jupiter because I have Jupiter, but I'm talking about Aquarius on the cusp. But I could say, even with Jupiter, like in personal experience, it's the ability to kind of, Jupiter is always going to be about what you can give. It's not your personality unless we have Jupiter, Sun conjunct Jupiter, Jupiter, even maybe, something like that, like Jupiter next to a personal planet. It can impact your personality a little bit more. But because of Jupiter being in Aquarius, what I think sometimes happens is like I am able to kind of spread ideas to other people, especially within like certain places, work and things like that. But it's not a pushy energy. It's, hey, I did it like this. And other people are like, oh, wow, I didn't know you could do it like that. That's kind of what I've experienced. And again, Jupiter adds a different layer to it. Again, I'm going to go into the other aspects of the sixth house. Sometimes some people, I don't know, but some of you, it depends on what's in there. Aquarius can mean things that are strange, unusual. Some people can have unusual health ailments. The sixth house is health. You want to be careful not to overstress yourself, overwork yourself. I have Jupiter in Aquarius, so I don't think that my experience has been more just weird, strange things that don't last that long, like weird ailments, but they're not serious, but they're just like, oh, now this is wrong, but then it goes away. So I don't know if Jupiter helps me in that regard or anything like that, but for some people with Aquarius there, it can represent like there's something that can be really triggered health-wise if you're not careful, or if you're overworking yourself, or if you're not really taking care of yourself in that way. The seventh house Aquarius person, well, we know this is the descendant. I have the descendant and the ascendant chart. The ascendant descendant video. Typically here we're talking about the descendant. So you're the Leo rising, Leo ascendant. You learn from these people how to do things your own way. You care less about popularity. Aquarius does care about people listening to their ideas because you need a following. Okay, I keep saying this, right? Aquarius is the individual because you're not afraid to be your own self. And before Aquarius brings ideas to the masses, they have to deal a lot with what's going on in here. They have to even experiment, act something out, do something, try it out before they can commit to their idea. Then there's a confidence in bringing that idea to others. But with that said, if you have Aquarius in the seventh house, you're a Leo ascendant. You're learning from them how to just do something for the benefit of others, for the thought process, moving things forward, being community minded, instead of just getting attention for self. Right? And there's nothing wrong with getting attention for self if you deserve it. If you deserve your acknowledgement, take it. But you see from these people how to really engage with the group, not just get their attention, but how to literally understand them, how to belong with them, how to have similar concepts of understanding life and other things around you is what you learn. Now, again, I do have that video, the ascendant descendant video. I'll probably spend a little bit more time in the video talking about the seventh house in this regard. Eighth house Aquarius. Well, we talked about detached. This can typically be the person. I do think with the eighth house Aquarius, you don't want to be attached to other people's money. You're probably a person that wants to be a little bit self-made. You want to do it on your own. Because the eighth house can be where we join up with other people. We can get their power. And by power, I don't mean like we're all trying to abuse. You're trying to abuse people. I mean, the eighth house, Mars and Pluto, we are either showing our power through Mars or we are consuming something to become more powerful through Pluto. Nothing wrong with that. Pluto's about evolving. We evolve through taking things in, internalizing them, and turning them into what we need from it, right? And so Aquarius being here can be the person who is like more, as far as money goes, you're not really going to want to take money from other people. You want to do it your own way. You don't have the same attachments. It's harder for people to bribe you. It's probably harder for people to bribe you. Because you're going to be looking at it like, well, I can make this myself, or I can do this myself. I'm not going to sacrifice my integrity for you because I'm already fixed. I already know what I think. I'm not going to. So I'm not saying anybody want to bribe anyone, but Aquarius is free thinking, free range type of energy, and their own kind of goal setting approach doesn't really speak to wanting to get something from somebody else when it comes to the eighth house. Now, what you can sometimes see here is a lot of a little overconsumption when it comes to intimacy with other people. Aquarius can be that. Let's be honest here, right? And again, I'm an adult, so my videos are for adults, so it is what it is. But Aquarius, sometimes the eighth house can detach itself from intimacy in order to enjoy, sexual, dalliances with other people. And that can mean like there's a little bit of detachment. You could get tripped up. You can get caught up in like, wait, I thought you loved me. We've been hanging out for 2 months. We've hung out all summer. But that person is, let's say we got Venus and Aquarius in the eighth house. So like, yes, and next summer there will be somebody else. Okay. And again, no one get mad. It depends on the rest of the chart, of course, but I like to give examples because there's somebody out there that's like, yes. And we're looking at the fact that Aquarius is not about joining up with you in an intimate way. It is not about the emotions. It's about the logic. It's about what makes sense. And if that person, it does not make sense for them to be in an intimate, connected, soul-seeking relationship with you, they're not going to do it. You can see a person who's like, I don't need a soulmate. My friend is my soulmate. So you can have people, Aquarius energy can really care a lot more about the group, their friends, than they even do people that they are supposed to care about sometimes. It's a fixed energy. You can have that detached, like, detachment that you can see that's very different than Capricorn, Saturn, whereas Capricorn is more about, well, this is my family. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm just going to pay their tuition. I'm mad at them, but I'm going to do the right thing. And that's Cancer as well. Now, if I'm attached, if Cancer or Capricorn is attached to you, and they're going to do it for you because there's like, you're a part of me, you're a part of my family. Yeah, we got issues. That can sometimes be, something that happens there. Yeah, so let's move on. You could get power from groups. Remember, we talked about the eighth house as part of empowerment or power. Empowerment or power, which one you want. You can see a culmination of power, being able to get a lot of influence through Aquarius in the eighth house as well. The ninth house Aquarius person. So I think Aquarius works really well in the ninth house, because yes, we see Sagittarius here, and Sagittarius is more about the change, the sparking something new in our belief systems. We need to have systems of belief. We need to know the truth. Aquarius is more about, we need to shake things up so that society thinks differently and does things a little bit differently, right? Aquarius is more that forward thinking approach, is why sometimes we can think of like science being related to Aquarius energy. And so I do think this is a great placement also for people who could be, you know, if you are interested more in like, if you have psychic abilities, you have intuitive abilities. I know a lot of times we think of that mostly from the 4th house, the 8th house, and 12th house is where we start from. But the 9th house can be seen as like, you know, getting information from a higher power. We're talking more about the, you know, the people who had prophecies. Well, the prophecy was through religion. 9th house was more religious traditionally, especially. 12th house more spirituality. Okay, so if you were getting prophecy or you had God speaking to you from the 9th house, that's what it was. And so Aquarius can be linked to that. Aquarius is linked to knowledge that is not common, knowledge that is not normal, knowledge that is not necessarily seen here. It requires thought, it requires goals, it requires process, it requires you to think outside of the limitations of what we had. So 9th house Aquarius, I think, works really well for someone who is interested in philosophy, someone who is interested in topics that deal with esoteric nature, traveling, exploration, discovery of things that are group, you know, a person who maybe even, is like a sociologist or something like that. Someone who goes and travels and studies other groups of people, probably has Aquarius in the 9th house or some type of connection to Sag Aquarius energy. You know, can get really, one thing I would say, the pitfall is, remember, Sagittarius is optimistic. And Aquarius doesn't quite always have that, right? Uranus is about spontaneity, but it's the difference than optimism of Jupiter. And so sometimes you can have a person whose mindset is very fixated. This is where you can see someone trying to get power over the minds of other people. Sag can be indoctrinating, but Sag is mutable. So at the end of the day, Sagittarius, I don't feel like is a forceful sign. They're like, this is what I think and this is what it is. Whereas Aquarius is, I feel like, that fixed energy is a little bit more finite, strategic enough to want to convince you to think something. And that doesn't always happen in the 11th house. Aquarius functions freely and more effectively in the 11th house. So I just would say that Aquarius energy can sometimes be, it can tap into that Saturn and be a little bit, parental. And this is what you're going to believe. And this is what you're going to say. And getting like, that could be a cult leader type of placement, right? And again, I'm not saying that's the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is groups of people listen to what you have to say. You have an audience, you have people who, you're a person who is, maybe you are a person of faith and you have a following. You have people who listen to you, people who tune into you in some way. So you have a platform, or you are someone that, when you're in a group dynamic, you're kind of the life of the intellectual conversation or something like that. Aquarius in the 10th house. Well, Aquarius in 10th house, I would look at, like I said, you notice the trend. Any of the earth houses, Aquarius is eventually going to want a little bit of freedom. I'm sorry, I didn't say that. The 6th house Aquarius people, you're eventually going to want to create your own schedule. No matter how rigid you are, no matter how by the book you are, some of y'all are going to want to. And most of you, in doing things in the proper way, eventually you're going to want something different in your everyday life. So that's just something to watch out for 6th house people. The 10th house is similar, but in a way in which you need to really make sure that you're working at something that really gives you a sense of intellectual power. Aquarius needs to be able to use its mind, and it needs freedom. If we're talking about the 10th house, we're talking in particular perhaps about the MC. I have a video about the MC and the IC. But there's freedom of thought. So going in a position, so let's say this person has heavy Aquarius energy in their chart. Let's say this person has, I don't know, what would be another sign? An Aries moon. Let's say that. They have an Aries moon somewhere. And, they're Aquarius at the cusp of the 10th house. This person needs freedom in their work environment. Meaning by freedom, I don't mean they can't follow rules. You can't stunt them. They have to be able to follow their thought down to the last bit. They have to be able to experiment. This can be great for like a scientist, someone who has to experiment, someone who has to test out theories, someone who has to, take time to develop certain ideas and then deliver those ideas. So a person who's really good at like being on their own, being able to do things independently, and then being able to give it out to other people. Now, we haven't talked at length about Aquarius in the community-minded aspect. Aquarius can be really community-minded and work really well in the 10th house. So you can say a person who's philanthropic, a person who works with groups, a person who does outreach, similar 6th house as well. can be outreach or groups. You work with an organization or clusters of people. The work that you do, if you have Aquarius, especially 6, I would say service, right? House of service, and 10th can be, organizations that require you to be a part of something, right? It could be a nonprofit. It could be a school. It could be some type of, company where you are, there's a community. There's a community aspect. So 10th house Aquarius people tend to like work in community type of environments, even when you do like to be a little bit more independent in the work that you do. Now, Aquarius, as we know, functions highly in the 11th house. Now, by functions, it means it depends on what else is there. We have to be careful because if you have a planet that is, if you have some chart placement showing power issues, it's going to show up in your relationships with other people within groups. So the 11th house is where we go. There's a whole video I have on the 11th house to belong. And the belonging to the 4th house is the people that you come from belonging, your roots. The 11th house is you're finding where you belong through shared ideology. And so with that said, Aquarius there functions because that's where Aquarius is they feel free to share their thoughts, to share their ideas. There's no restrictions. The person tends to, let's say they have Uranus and Aquarius. This is a person who's always felt nurtured or comfortable sharing their views, sharing their ideas, especially if they have, let me think about this. Would this be possible? Let's say someone has Uranus and Aquarius in the 11th house. Let's say the person also has Moon and Aquarius in the 11th house. Okay. If that was possible, if they had that, this person has probably felt nurtured their whole life or had somebody to rely on to help them develop their independent thoughts. You know how some people in life have been nurtured to be an individual. Their parents let them be an individual. The people around them, their friends let them be an individual. You know that person that's in their friend group, they're a little bit different, but everyone's like supportive of them. They're like, yeah, that's just so-and-so. That would be the experience of if you have Aquarius that's positively aspected in the 11th house. You feel a freer, you feel more aware of being supported and listened to in terms of the groups that you belong to. You are the person who kind of drives the thought, whether it is the group collective. You understand what the group needs and you're able to deliver the ideas in a way that help other people. So if you have this placement or you have this, especially if you planets, develop that because that's a great strength for someone. Now, again, it's more so within groups. It is more of the networks, companies, even friendship groups. You have some type of pull. You have some type of power. You have the ability to be seen and perceived as somebody who has a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Confidence in terms of sharing your ideas. Even when it comes to work, you might benefit when you share your ideas among other people. Whereas this could ironically be the person who has trouble with the 7th house. So we have to look at the fact that where somebody's strong, they might have issues other places. So this person could have a really jacked up 7th house with some difficult relationships. So maybe this person struggles in one-to-one partnerships and relationships, but they thrive in the group. They thrive at work. They thrive at sports, organizations. Aquarius, I want to do, Aquarius energy, it's interesting because, sometimes you just see Aquarius energy, and maybe these are the Aquarius people that maybe they have a little bit of Aries in them that are very active physically. So you could see a person who's just like the captain of the team, the leader of the team, because they know how to lead through thought. They know how to lead through strategy, not leading through just the emotions. But if you want to work in a field that requires emotions, you have to learn how to work with other people. So it would depend on what you want to do. Now, lastly, we're going to deal with the 12th house. Okay. So the 12th house. Okay. Near and dear to me. Aquarius. So sometimes, again, when we're talking about what's hidden, what we don't see, what we don't recognize, what is not out in the open. So sometimes you can see a person, let's say the Saturn and Aquarius here, especially, there's a disconnect from the group. It's different than the 11th house now and 9th house. You might not feel like you have a voice among the group. Now, let's say this is a person that also has Chiron in Gemini. Yeah, you don't feel like you have a voice among the group. You feel like for some reason you are not listened to, you are not respected, or you were not given a chance. You're highly sensitive though, and likely have some sense of, anyone can have spiritual abilities. I think it's more so when we talk about the 12th house is what kind, you get what I'm saying? The Aquarius mind. So if you have Mercury here, especially, you have a lot of insight and intel. It might drive you crazy because your thoughts and your understanding of things spiritually might be so out of the realm of what you can experience here in the physical world. someone has Uranus and Aquarius in the 12th house, and some outer planets, that can create a lot of experiences spiritually. Whereas with the earth people, if someone has earth in the 12th house, they're sometimes a little bit, it's easier to translate your spiritual messages into the outside world. It's a little bit easier to translate what it means. Whereas Aquarius energy can be you can get really complex, really deep, perceptive understandings of things beyond what we do. And that is why it's important for you guys, especially to channel your creativity. Those weird ideas, those things that don't make sense, those things that you're like, I dreamt about this weird thing, create something out of it. And I say the 12th house all the time. Not everything is meant to be said. There are certain messages we get through 12th house. We're not meant to, you don't have to tell everybody everything that you know about the universe. There might even be things that scare people, and there's things that you don't feel comfortable talking about. But with Aquarius, it is going to be a very unique mind. It could be the hidden genius. Let's say a person does have Aquarius planets in the 12th house. They have all these ideas that they're afraid to share with the group. They feel disconnected. You've been shut down. You have been maybe bullied, or you have been in some way discarded from groups, right? Or society does not accept you. So you retreat to your comfort zone. You retreat to escapism. But you want to be careful, because the goal I always tell people in general, tell Aquarius people this in particular, you got to find your tribe, right? Everybody. You have to find who accepts you. You have to find who and what space and what venue are people going to listen to you. What people are going to support you. And then you need to put yourself in those positions every time. Even in work. Okay, work's not working out for you. We need to find what community, what place accepts us and allows for us to really thrive and be our best selves. So that's what I would say for Aquarius 12th house people, is find your tribe. If you have been disconnected from the group, if somebody has put you off to the side, if you feel different from your family, if you feel like society doesn't understand you, has never tried to, it's really important. There's people out there like you. And, you have to sometimes put yourself out there, put a piece of yourself out there in order to really connect with the people that you're meant to connect with on that more spiritual plane. So that is it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Please hit the like button if anything resonated.